Welcome back. Now, the Trump administration has brought about 50 white South Africans to the United States as refugees. The United States says it is the start of a larger relocation effort for white South Africans, which it claims are being persecuted because of their race. Now, the South African government has dismissed the U.S. government's allegations as completely false. And in other news developments, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has given a cautious response to Russian President Vladimir Putin's offer of direct peace talks. But to talk to us more about some of these developments, we're joined virtually now by a researcher at the Thabo Mbeki School of Public and International Affairs at UNISA, Advocate Sipho Mantula. Advocate Mantula, good to have you with us here on Morning Live. Welcome. All right, we seem to have just lost that connection to Advocate Mantula, working to get it back. But of course, so much happening. We heard earlier with our correspondent, Trent Murray, in that crossing to Tel Aviv this morning, what the latest is. The U.S. President Donald Trump, he is embarking on an official trip to the Middle East and, of course, visiting 3 countries, but will not, of course, be visiting Israel during this particular visit. But also, of course, later this week, there is expectation of direct talks between the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, in Turkey. But it remains to be seen, because Zelenskyy has indicated that he most certainly will be there in attendance. And the question now is to see whether the Russian President Vladimir Putin will attend these talks in Turkey. We know when Donald Trump came to office, he was very clear and determined to end that war between Russia and Ukraine. And it has taken a bit longer than I suppose he anticipated he would to actually bring an end to this war. But is this the moment? Will they be able to broker a truce in Turkey this week? And of course, we remain to see what happens there. And then, of course, also the trade wars that erupted post the Trump administration's entry into the White House. And we will also update you on what the latest is there between the United States and China, and how that is likely to impact the global economic sphere. But I believe we do have Advocate Sipho Mantula back. Advocate Mantula, good morning and welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, my sister, and Jumbo Africa, to the viewers of Morning Live on this Africa Month. Apologies, I don't know, maybe the Americans who are pleasing us to go live on visuals.
Now, and I want to start on that point, Advocate Mantula. We saw a group of Afrikaners rush to the U.S. at a time when the Trump administration has suspended refugee resettlement from everywhere else in the world, and begging the question as to what is the situation with these white South Africans and why are they being prioritized?
Sakina, this is shocking, but what we are seeing, it is the implementation of the executive order of February the 7th of 2025. And you will recall the rebuttal by the President Ramaphosa during the SONA, that all the allegations that have been raised by the U.S. on having a certain privilege to a certain class and a certain race, on certain issues, Sakina, that we know that there have been issues of the question of the land reform debate, the issues around crime and the killings, but they are not founded. But as you look, South Africa has acceded to more than 3 international instruments when we are talking about refugees. We have our Refugee Act of 1998, where there is actually what we call abusive application of asylum seekers. And that's what we are seeing now with this move of the 49 white South Africans who are becoming delinquents, by the way, Zakina, because when you look at the Refugee Act, there must be some threat, there must be some fear, there must be some prejudice. But if we look 31 years later in this country, South Africans are the one who have been bearing this brand. I don't think this will actually sound very well when we look at the geopolitics between South Africa and U.S. We've seen our Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Alvin Botes, on Friday, trying, or what I'll call trying to massage Americans on trying to re-educate them on the refugee laws and how do we treat this matter. Some of us, again, we have said, maybe this issue of the white African fears should have been ventilated at the delayed national dialogue. Probably President Ramaphosa delayed this national dialogue. We should have dealt with these fears and uncertainties of the white communities.
And the point you touch on there, Advocate Mantula, about the Refugee Act, because who is a refugee and under which circumstances do this group of South Africans, and of course we are told that there would be more, there would be a bigger group that will follow on this. So when you say there needs to be some repercussions where, how and by whom?
Sakina, it is by the state. Remember, as I said, we are signatories to the 1951 Refugee Act, the 1967 Protocol, and that's where you get this definition. But at the same time, you have Section 22 of our own Constitution and 21, which allows the freedom of movement and the freedom of choice. So there might not be a serious repercussions, but there must be lessons learned in terms of people who have peddled wrong information, claiming that in South Africa there is genocide happening. And that's where, as a state, the issue of the hate crime, the issue around how people peddle wrong information should be dealt with. Hence, I said, if they are raising persecution based on race, religion, nationality, I think South Africa has tried to raise the issue of constitutional democracy. They've tried to raise the issue of our judicial system that is effective, that could have dealt with these issues. But I don't think we should be worried about a tiny minority when you have a lot of people, more than 50 million, 60 people million that are suffering, Sakina, and they have not been seeking refugees, even if it is tough. And we know very well that we are also experiencing refugees from other African countries that we have to deal with. So when you look at this case of the white African affairs and their misinterpretation of international law and our own national law, because I think Dirko is correct to be saying that how are you going to justify if you have to return back? Because it seems now you are applying what we call a dual citizenship.
So is it clear at this stage, Advocate Mantula, exactly how many Afrikaners have applied or been granted this refugee status?
Remember, Sakina, we had the numbers of 150 to 60, but for now you have to go through a vetting process, which is done by our immigration, home affairs, has to be done by our criminal intelligence unit to look at criminal records. But also we have to look at the issues that will mean to then say that if they are applying, are they going to be certain where they are going? Because it seems that they have a special privilege. Trump is busy chasing Africans out of the U.S., and he's allowing a certain class of tourists, by the way, to the U.S. as refugees. And that's how we can say that the numbers will either go high or they will go low, because we know, Sakina, that there are numbers of Afrikaners and white people who are not happy about this move that came out with the executive order of 7 February.
And then just moving on to Donald Trump, but in a different context. The U.S. president is embarking on first foreign trip of the second administration, a major trip that is, with a tour of the Middle East. So what is to be expected here, Advocate Mantula?
Sakina, remember, this is another replay. In his first Trump administration, 2017, he went to the Gulf. One looks at the Gulf ties between the U.S., but this time, I mean, it's not Tel Aviv, it's not Israel, but he's going to strengthen his efforts with Saudi Arabia on the issues around security, pacifying Iran, going to Qatar, the Doha. We know his interest in the DRC minerals now. As Doha, there's been one of the mediators. And when you look at United Arab Emirates also, there are issues of economic ties and cultural exchange. So others are looking at this trip that Trump is trying in his second administration to deal with the ending of the crisis in Gaza, to deal with the Iran threats, but also to try to spike the global BRICS out, Sakina, because remember that Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates have this appetite of joining the global south. Now, for them going, accepting this treat of Trump, it's also part of what we call, transactional diplomacy. Trump is very clear, even if others are saying that he has his family that's got interest in the Gulf. Washington has said, no, this trip is particularly on economic ties between Washington and the Gulf Arab states.
And of course, should Israel be concerned? Do you think that they will read something else into this particular trip, especially given this latest development of a U.S. hostage that is being kept, and there's an exchange deal on the cards from Hamas that they will release this one citizen who holds a dual citizenship of Israel and the United States. That hostage deal seemingly bypassed Tel Aviv as well.
Absolutely. Benjamin Netanyahu will be worried because he did went to Washington 2 weeks ago to meet with Trump with a way of trying to appease him and say that you need to be on our side as you are dealing with Iran. We are busy dealing with the question of ICJ, and we have to run against South Africa. But at the same time, as you are raising this issue of the Hamas hostage person that they have to deal with. Trump, I don't think he's concerned with Israel now. His main issue now is to deal with the Gulf on economic gains that America can benefit and can continue where he has left in 2017, but also emphasize the question of Russia and Ukraine. Remember that his ball is on Russia and Ukraine conflict also, but at the same time, the one of Israel and Palestine, he is double-minded and double-sided that we don't know where Trump is his view on Israel, when actually his first trip in 2017, he went to Israel, and that was still a hectic moment. So one looks at that. For him excluding Israel and ignoring them, it is actually showing America's view on going to the Middle East and strengthening what I have said earlier, transactional foreign policy tactics of Washington.
And I want us to touch on the Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday proposing direct negotiations to end the conflict with Ukraine. However, he didn't address a 30-day ceasefire proposal that was drawn up by the European leaders some hours earlier. Now, we heard, at least I saw from some news agencies, where the Ukrainian President Zelenskyy has stated that he will be there in Turkey this week, but not too sure, at least from how it is being reported, whether Vladimir Putin will in fact attend. But what is your reading into that, given what Putin has said?
Sakina, remember, this is the second meeting since they met in 2022. And this is very important that Putin has said that there are no preconditions. He wants them to resume direct talks. And there's no conditionality of the ceasefire that we saw of the train of four willing powers, France, Germany, Poland, meeting over the weekend, countering what Putin was doing over the weekend, also meeting with African leaders. Now here, Sakina, we need to bear in mind that there was an African Peace Initiative, but Putin here, he is raising the issues around there is a need to engage with Ukraine, and as they are engaging, there's a central venue, and that is very important when you want to engage, that there is a sense of neutrality of the mediator. But at the same time, you cannot, before you engage, you want to have a unilateral ceasefire for 30 days. Considering that there are both violations on both sides, Ukraine has been going to the International Criminal Court accusing Russia. It has been in the UN General Assembly pushing also that Russia must be isolated, there must be sanctions against Russia. So one looks at this, that Putin is aware that after the victory day, he has managed to galvanize the African voice. He has managed to also get Trump and President Ramaphosa to agree with him on these direct talks. But those direct talks cannot already be seen as the ceasefire because both sides are on what I will call insulting zone. They are on offensive zone. And secondly, you will understand that these talks are very important considering that President Putin is looking at the crisis that has affected Africa also, because it seems that when we want to define this conflict of Ukraine, we tend to forget the African impact. When you look at food security, when you look at students who have suffered when this war started in 2022, but also the broader implication that it means Africa must take the center stage and not rely on external help from Russia or Ukraine, because we knew when the war started, both Russia and Ukraine were the ones who were feeding Africa with fertilizers. There was the issue of wheat, there was issues of oil, but we are struggling now. But that gives Africa continental free trade an opportunity to can survive. That gives Africa peace mediation efforts also to be seen. Because one asks, if they are going to take Satina, who will be the mediator, considering that Trump is also gaining up with the willing four that were in TV in the trade.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. Advocate Mantula, so much to talk about, but thanks so much for sharing your views with us there. Advocate Sipho Mantula, looking at some of the international news stories making headlines. And, of course, President Trump, when he came into office during the second administration, was, I suppose, very gung-ho about being able to end these conflicts and end them quickly. But it has proven to be a lot more difficult, I think, than he expected.